What's up, guys? Today we're going to talk about sleep versus rest and what that has to do with work, training, living, being a human being. We're not going to talk about a bunch of neuroscience. Nobody really cares about that except me. I love that shit. But we're going to talk about why sleep is different than rest, how they're different, and how to integrate them, again, with work.
We love that story.
All right, so let's start with the very basics, the difference between sleep and rest. I'm sure you've been in a situation where you slept pretty poorly, but you still had to function the next day, and you were like, oh my God, I actually have some adrenaline pumping through my body. Maybe you're even somebody who's convinced yourself that even though you're sleeping less to 7 to 9 hours, which is what every human being needs, and there's really no excuse for us not getting that much sleep.
I can function like that.
Okay, so you've slept, not great, but you feel rested. What about the flip side of that? You slept freaking amazing. You slept for 12 hours. You feel like you had quality sleep, and you're like, groggy as hell. We've all been there, and you're just like, I gotta get coffee in me right now. So you slept, but you weren't rested. So what we need to start with in this paradigm is that sleep is a form of resting, but rest isn't a form of sleep. So sleep is basically the bare minimum of performance. When we go to sleep, there's a lot of stuff happening. We've got this sequence of hormonal release, inhibition, and we're consolidating memories, and we're working on our feelings. There's little bitty cells in the middle of our brain, the hypothalamus, called the SEN. These tiny little nuclei that basically pay attention to the light and dark cycles in your circadian rhythm. You've probably heard that before, of when it's light outside, when it's dark, and that your body starts to release melatonin and turns your arousal system all the way down, etc. It's a very complicated system that all of us humans have. Our brains are literally programmed to sleep. Some people may have sleep issues. That's a different story. Please go see your specialist and work on that, as well as get in a sleep schedule. Sleep is so very important, and we need to make time and periodize sleep as well, have routines for before and after we sleep, and have set times when we go to sleep. But what about rest? If sleep is this much of resting, rest isn't also sleep. The interesting thing about rest is it's just as psychological as it is physical, what I would call, as a psychophysiologist, psychophysiology. It's important to rest from like physical strain, like training or stress or just being tired, generally speaking, physically exhausted. But what about mental exhaustion? What about mental strain? What about emotional stress? What about load from working? Or have you ever taken an exam and you haven't moved your body for 3 hours and yet you're mentally exhausted? You probably need to rest and regenerate after that. When we're doing a speed session, for example, with my athletes, I might program something like 10 times 10 meter sprints at maximum capacity, 100%. We're working on acceleration. And then I'm going to say, all right, 45 to 60 seconds rest in between each sprint. You're going to walk the way back. You're going to stand around. You're going to wait for a little while. And considering that sprint took maybe 3 seconds, it kind of seems a little bit exaggerated that I'm having them rest for 45 seconds, doesn't it? But the body actually needs that in order to get them to work back to maximum capacity when they go sprint again. Squats, for example, if we're doing a hypertrophy phase, but that's not maximum performance. You're never maximally performing when you're a hypertrophy phase. You're literally driving yourself into an exhaustion versus when you're doing maximal strength, because this one you're working under exhaustion, that's the goal, and this one you want peak performance and maximum output. And the rest is often 5 times the amount of work, like 5 times as long as the amount of work that you actually put in, so that your body can get back to performing, have the capacity to perform at maximum capacity so that you get the most out of every single lift. In regards to physical training, we always need that physical rest in order to be physically prepared. You also need psychological rest to be physically prepared, but that's a different story because the brain and body always work together. However, if you are under a lot of mental strain or emotional distress, or there's just a lot going on, or you're having to study and train, or coronavirus is happening in May and June of 2020 and all this different stuff. There's a lot going on. So your body's going to be, and brain, they're all going to be naturally fatigued, even if you don't necessarily feel it. Even if you don't feel weary, but you know that you're under stress, you're going to need to plan rest, just like we do in training sessions. Just when my athlete is only doing 3 sets of 30-meter sprints, he or she is still resting for 2 minutes in between those sprints. They're still resting way longer than the work it actually took, because I need them to rest maximally in order to perform maximally. And that's programmed in. The case that I'm making is you don't always have to be completely exhausted and completely wiped or even really have physical or mental symptoms of performance decrement before you take rest time. Plan your rest in, literally. Make time in your calendar for I'm going to rest here, I'm going to rest there, I'm going to rest there. I say I'm going to work for 50 minutes, then I'm going to take 20 minutes off and do nothing work related whatsoever. I'm going to go outside and walk, I'm going to pet my dog, I'm going to play Animal Crossing, like whatever it may be within those 20 minutes, but I'm not working. And then I go back and work for another 50 minutes because I have it periodized out. When you say I'm going to rest during these times, actually rest. Unless it's really your thing, or unless you've cleared it with a coach or something like that to do active rest. When you're taking time off of training, literally go do something else. Like stop thinking about sports, go hang out with your friends, go call somebody, go read a book, go do something else, instead of being like, now that I don't have to go to the gym today because I'm resting, I'm going to go do 50 kilometers on the bike, because that might be mentally refreshing, but does it help your physical performance? Are you going to come back physically refreshed? Are you going to come back being able to perform maximally? That's the question. I know my biggest problem is when I say I'm taking a break for a day or whatever, then I try and cram all the CEUs that I didn't have time for before into that day, and then I never wind up feeling rested because I literally just worked the entire day from work that was left over from the other days that I hadn't finished. That's not resting. So program it in, plan on it, rest even if you feel like you don't have to rest, even if you feel like you're not exhausted, because you're not supposed to be exhausted to rest. You don't have to earn your rest. Actually freaking rest. We do need to address this. If you're looking for an excuse to not work, you're not going to find it here. If you're looking for an excuse to procrastinate, you're not going to find it here. Yes, just as much as rest needs to be programmed into the schedule, so does work need to be programmed into the schedule. So if you're having the opposite problem, where you feel like you're resting too much or you procrastinate a lot or whatever, literally program times with deadlines for yourself and like actual time boundaries, and then program your time to rest and stick to both of those. Be very clear and concise in sticking to both of those. On the other side of that, and I think the coronavirus pandemic and the lockdown that resulted from that in most countries has made this abundantly clear. We live in cultures that very much value this grind and hustle mentality, where the first thing that people said was, don't you know that Isaac Newton discovered gravity while he was in quarantine or whatever? People expect you to have like 8 businesses, a firstborn child.
No. Stop.
So neither of these extremes of extreme overproductivity, I never ever need to rest, there's no excuse for that. I pretty much always rest because I don't want to work. There's really no maximal performance on either one of those spectrums. If you live on those spectrums, you want to kind of bring it towards the middle of still planning to rest and planning to work. This overachiever over here can't say, I'll sleep when I'm dead, I'll rest when I'm dead. You still need to program rest external to sleep, in addition to sleep, on top of sleep, more than sleep, into your life program in order to perform maximally. I really love what the nap ministry talks about. They talk about Trisha Hersey. She says that rest is an act of resistance because we live in this culture that just grinds and grinds and grinds. And when we say, no, stop, I'm not going to take part in that, which I hope is part of our new normal. No, stop. I'm going to value my health. I'm going to value my well-being. I'm going to value my productivity and my performance and the quality of my work over this grind culture. We can rest more and we can also be more productive. Wow, amazing. We can recover in the meantime. Sometimes we need longer rest periods. Sometimes we need shorter rest periods. And again, this is just as much physical as it is psychological and emotional and all of the components that come with that, because the brain and body always work together. Thanks very much to our handy dandy nervous system. Too long, didn't read it. Rest and sleep aren't the same. Sleep is a form of rest. Rest isn't a form of sleep. Periodize it, plan it in, plan to work, plan to rest, plan to sleep, prioritize all of those things. If you can invest in resting at maximal capacity, you will be able to get closer to your maximal capacity of performing. Thanks for listening. I hope this was helpful. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, if I can't answer it, I'll find somebody who can, or I will answer it for you in another video. Thanks so much for listening. Please subscribe, like this, whatever. I don't know what channel you're listening to this on, and I really hate doing all of this. So until I find an outro, bye.